Welcome to our very first book study on Don't Let Doubt Take You Out. So this book was introduced to me by Sideline Diamond, and she talked a little bit about how she was going through some seasons of doubt. And I felt like it was such a very common topic. And so I got involved a little bit in looking up this book, and I was immediately drawn to the fact that it's such a common denominator for any human being. And if we think about it, doubt was already a thing when Adam and Eve were placed in the garden. And so the foreword of this book is done by John Maxwell. If you don't know who John Maxwell is, you should. He's like the biggest personal growth coach in the world. He's done it for like 60 some years. And he did the foreword for Todd Mullins in this book, because Todd Mullins is actually John Maxwell's pastor. And so that really set the tone in this book. And the words that he shared about Todd Mullins was really special. And I knew digging into it, we would have some really good content. So this is a book study of where we want to be collaborating and sharing together, sharing our points of view, because it'll be unique to each person and it'll be what you have experienced, not what someone else is experiencing, right? So let's start with the introduction. And I want this to be like very open. So we would love to have your cameras on, show us your faces so that we can talk to each other. It's so much easier to talk when we're actually talking to a face. And then unmute at any time when you want to share something, and please do share. And if you don't have the book yet, don't worry about it. You'll still get a lot out of what we're sharing right now. Once your book arrives, you will catch up on the reading and it'll make sense to you. So the danger of doubt. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind, 2 Timothy 1:7. And he tells the story of how him and his wife went mountain biking when they had never gone mountain biking before. And they did the first run, and it was fairly easy. And so they made it down the mountain, but he had rented the bikes for 2 hours and it only took 20 minutes to do the first run. So he's like, hey, let's do it again, but let's make it a little bit harder. And you know how sometimes when you just kind of do things without thinking, and then all of a sudden you realize this is probably not a very good idea. So his wife hit a rock and went flying off of her bike, hurt herself very badly. Long story, they ended up on the mountain with multiple broken bones. Took a very long time for someone to come and rescue them. This whole scenario created a lot of doubt in him future-wise as he was trying to trust himself to make decisions, right? And it's very relatable, because we've all made mistakes of where we made a rash decision or something didn't turn out the way that we thought it would. And then it, turned into something that we didn't want to experience again, ever again. And then what happens when the next time that you're called to make a decision or that you're called to trust yourself, you feel doubt slipping in, right? And so our common enemy, doubt, it's our let me have the words this morning. It's our common enemy. From our earliest memories, doubt was probably there on the first day of school, waiting for you in the playground, a word spoken, a look given. Doubt followed you throughout middle school and high school, exposing your insecurities, causing you to compare your failures to everyone else's successes. As an adult, this adversary shows up repeatedly at significant times in your life, trying to convince you that you don't have what it takes, or you're not good enough. When seeds of doubt get planted, they often produce the fruit of insecurity, fear, and anxiety, and trying to trip you up and take you out of the game, all while convincing you that you're the only one struggling in this area. Everyone else appears so confident and so capable. Doesn't that sound relatable? And the part about how we think it's only us. We think it's only us that is dealing with this, right? And especially now, let's take that context and think about building our business at Plexus. Because what are we selling? We're selling ourselves first. People buy you before they buy anything about Plexus, who Plexus is, what the products are. It is what I love, he defines as Godfidence. It's not just confidence, it's your Godfidence, right? And so doubt doesn't just cause us to question our self-worth, it also seeps into our relationships. And when the people closest to us let us down or disappoint us, doubt whispers in our ear, causing us to question the motives of their loyalty, right? Can I trust them? Will they hurt me again? And when we listen to the voices of doubt, it becomes a destructive force that tries to ruin our relationships and diminish the quality of life by robbing us of the joy found in vulnerability. So I don't know if I've ever read about joy and vulnerability being together in the same sentence, because most times it's quite hard to be vulnerable. And joy and vulnerability in the same sentence really gave me joy, because there can be joy in vulnerability. Anything that stands out to you guys there?
I think I'm almost, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. I think I'm almost at the end of my service here, but there's one part that I really, really liked. When it came to the point where he said his childhood had been fantastic, like his parents had been his biggest cheerleaders, and yet he still dealt with so much doubt.
Yes.
One, I very much related to that because that was my childhood, and I still have dealt with so much doubt and insecurity in my life. And two, I was like, as a parent, that is very like encouraging because you're never going to get it all right. You're never going to figure it. You're never going to be the perfect parent. It's not possible. I feel like doubt is just part of the human wiring. It's part of the fact that we are on a broken earth, and that's just our reality. But it was encouraging to me because we all still have the choice on if we're going to choose what we're going to channel this doubt into, like we talked about. Like we get that choice, and so for me, it was maybe more so reassuring than even encouraging. Like it was like, okay, we are not alone in this. It felt like I'm not alone in this. We are all in this together. That's how it felt to me.
And we are, even if we don't tell ourselves that, or if we don't recognize that, right? We all struggle with the same things. So doubt in its simplest form is a feeling of uncertainty or a lack of conviction, according to Webster's dictionary. It is a natural part of the human condition. Who among us doesn't deal with feelings of uncertainty or a lack of conviction from time to time, right? At a very young age, we learn to face uncertainty because there is so much we don't yet know. And so when I thought about how overwhelm is simply just a lack of clarity, that's where doubt comes in, right? We're just not clear on what is coming. And so that's where he talks about his childhood was really good, and yet it really depended on what he was exposed to, and how his parents were of his biggest supporters. So we often see people who appear to have it all together, and we assume they must never deal with doubt. Well, that is a lie. That is not true. Most of them just work harder to get through it. And it's largely something that we try to avoid instead of just working our way through it, right? And you know that whole kid song of where you can't go over it, can't go under it, can't go around it. That's doubt. You have to go through it. You have to be able to process what you're feeling, allow the feeling to be there, trust yourself, and then move on, right? How is this sitting with you guys? Is it feeling like Oh, Suzanne, you were asking where I was reading about joy and vulnerability. On page 5, it's where he talks about them together. How is this feeling for you guys? Is it setting thoughts into action of where you're like, oh, this reminds me of me? You know, I had things come to mind right away of where I was like, that made a lot of sense. So we often see people who have it all together, and we assume they must never deal with doubt. They're confident, successful, on top of their game. We believe that somehow they must be exempt from this battle we are facing. So that's kind of our thoughts towards others who we think are not struggling with the same thing that we are. So we make it our own battle. And in reality, we're all doing the same thing, right? So if doubt is the seed, this is on page 7, fear is the fruit. The first thing that came to mind for me there was fear and faith cannot coexist together. And so if doubt is the seed that we're planting and we're reaping fear as the fruit, then we have some work to do. Seeds of doubt produce some ugly fruit: insecurity, anxiety, low self-worth, but the most common byproduct of doubt is fear. Psychologists say that fear is the most common shared emotion of the human race. That's terrible. That's terrible. We're just like human beings all living in fear. Fear of the future, fear of the unknown, fear that someone we love will die and leave us. And then he talks about all the phobias that people have that all just stem from fear. Fear can freeze you up, causing you to miss out on the life that God has for you. That's a pretty big statement, right? Because we can actually keep ourselves in a place to miss out on the goodness of what God has for us. I would love to hear your thoughts, because I know that it's not just me thinking these things as we're reading this. God doesn't want you staying where you are. He wants to do more in you and through you than you could ever imagine. I love the examples of the Bible stories that he has there and how those are very tangible and real examples for us to see, right? And so if we go on to his points about doubt is the seed, doubt is a lid on your opportunities. And this speaks in direct proportion to building our plexus business, right? If we have feelings of insecurity, will cause us to not step out and take risk. And as a result, you miss out on the life God has for you to live. Self-doubt will convince you that you can't, and so then you don't. And doubt becomes a lid, keeping you from ever reaching your full potential. What is something that we need in plexus in order to build and to grow together? So we need to take risk, and we need to remove the lid and to increase our growth, right? And so doubt is a restraint on our relationships. It will limit how deep and meaningful your relationships will ever become. This is a trust issue most times. You will allow suspicion and second guessing to become your norm, restricting and restraining intimacy and vulnerability. And as a result, your relationships can only go surface deep. That's mostly when we talk about having walls up and not being open and allowing people to see the real you. Doubt is a disruptor to your connection with God because you can't see it or touch it or prove it. Doubt will attempt to discount your connection to God, causing you to question your faith and drive you further away from your Father. But when you understand what doubt is trying to do, you can deal with it before it takes you out. And doubt is also an indicator, a warning signal, like a light on your dashboard. alerting you that your engine oil is low or your engine is overheating, doubt indicates that something needs to be addressed. Something that stands out to you guys there.
I was just gonna say, like, for me, it probably wasn't until not too many years ago as an adult that I even knew how to get to the root of dealing with these things. Like when you're a kid and things happen to you and the way you internalize it, like we all have our different things that cause the self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
But like as a kid, like I was just going through the years insecure and all that and didn't even know I was really, right? Like, so I'm just thinking like, how do you do better as, I mean, our kid's already 22, so it's a little late, but he's an adult now. But when you're raising children, like they say, like you do all the things you can, but I don't know. I don't know what you can do differently or how to work with children to be aware of those things at an even younger age to deal with them, right? Other than, I guess, for me, it would be just being more rooted in God's truth, like your identity in Christ. To me, that's what it always comes down to. And that's how I found help going through those things and have to keep going back to that over and over. I don't know if I'm just rambling a bit, but I was just thinking, like, how do you even deal with it as a child to do better, instead of taking it through all these years? You know, luckily, some people maybe in their teens, you know, work through these things at a younger age. But I know for me, it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I started to work on them. And I know I never will be finished working on them. But yeah, I just thought, it would be really nice that children would be able to learn to deal with these things, you know, at a younger age, not carry it with them for so long, and to be aware that it's even a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, just, yeah, and that you're not alone, that we all have things. Yeah.
I think it's self-awareness, right? Teaching self-awareness. And it's also a very personal journey. Like you said, like that's a personal journey. I love the examples that he's using. Consider Moses when God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. He also said, please, Lord, I have never been eloquent. I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. There is so many of these reasons that we use to also not be asked to do something that we're scared of doing, right? We get in front of a crowd of people and we're like, don't pick me. I cannot talk. I cannot be clear. Don't pick me. Like, I really couldn't bring something of value. Yes, you could, because he allows you to. And if we do it without degrading ourselves, then we can. He talks about David and Esther. And what did these ordinary people have that we can access today? Was it more than just putting on a brave face and running towards the giant or saying a quick prayer before confronting Pharaoh? And although I'm not an expert, I have come a long way from that moment when I was frozen by fear on a Colorado mountain. I have learned to discern the different ways of doubt will present itself and how to replace fear with faith. And I believe that is what we're walking into in this book. Doubt does not have to be a dead end. So I'm very excited to dig into it. So chapter 1, and I don't know if we're going to get through as much as what, we talked about reading the first 2 chapters, but the introduction was quite long. And I don't want to be like just rolling through it. We want to actually take it in. And we want to be respectful of your time too. Chapter 1, the wonder years, when doubt first came out. You are what you believe yourself to be. Paul Coelho. That's a statement that is just way too true, isn't it? You are what you believe yourself to be. And sometimes we don't believe the best about ourselves, but we get to change that. So he talks about moving as a kid and how, it sounds like he's moved quite a bit. And then this is such a common example, right? New kids, new school. And he got into PE class and standing there in gym shorts and a shirt that felt 2 sizes too small. And one of the classmates says something. And these words, I bet you anything, we could probably all come up with at least one example of what someone once said to us that kind of stuck, right? We just took it, claimed it to be our own, and carried it along with all our life. And if you think about it, that's so absurd that we feel the need to do that we claim those words and keep them, right? So the kid says, hey, you look like the Pillsbury Doughboy. Well, it's not exactly a compliment. Kind of rude, right? And he took that, and the kids laughed, and so you can feel how he felt. Wasn't the most affirming comment. And so for most of us, the seeds of doubt, of self-doubt, are sown in our childhood during those formative years, just like Ramona said. And it's something that creates the self-belief that we have about ourselves. I think sometimes it's good to go back and think about those things that have been spoken over us and take them and remove them, to not allow them to still sit there, because they are seeds and they keep feeding. Interesting part that he says, research highlights that children's self-esteem develops as early as 4 or 5. And so things like this that can be spoken over children are very fertile seeds. Anything that comes to mind in that?
The part at the beginning of the chapter where it says you are what you believe yourself to be, I think that's something that's really good about the community that we have here, is everyone here can remind us of things that we don't even see ourselves. Because very often I haven't, in certain areas, I didn't think that I was good in that area, but then someone in this group would be like, hey, this is what you are good at. And I thought, oh, I had never actually thought about that. And so I think just that alone, this community is worth so much, and seeing something that we don't see ourselves.
Totally. For us, it'll be it'll roll off the tongue, right? Like, oh, I've always been this way. Yeah, but you're affirming it as well. And that's keeping you there, right? And when I was first challenged to listen to how I talked about myself, I was appalled at what I heard in here. It's like, that's what I've been feeding myself my whole life, like Ramona said, till 40. And when someone calls you out on it, then you become more aware and you see the detriment of it too.
I think a lot of it too is that you don't realize you have a choice when things are brought to your attention. We just thought we had to take them in and rub them on our heart and hold them so dear and almost let them ruin us. Whereas we realize, well, we don't have to do that. You have a choice when things happen. Going through that a lot with the kids right now. It's like, it's not about what happens, it's how you respond. And like Ramona said, and Tira, you're right, like that awareness and is huge for kids these days. It's just that being aware. And that's honestly the first step, is just being aware of what it is, how it's affecting you, and then, making a little pivot, to make sure that it's not something that you are taking in and digesting. Because just like words, they can be positive or they can actually be harmful, right? So, and I second what Tira said, because I, so thankful for the community, because she's right. When you're in your own head, you're almost in a box
Mm.
where you have your ideas, and it's just so nice for others to see you differently or remind you of things. And yeah, like super, super valuable. But yes, we have a choice, and that's where the power is, right? And being aware of that doubt when it comes in, or the fear, and being able to be like, no, you know what? I'm gonna be okay. Like, I don't know this yet, but we're gonna work through it, and we're gonna get to a better place with it. So yeah, it's really good.
Such a good point. I don't know this yet, which means we can learn more, which means we have the ability to change the path that we're on, right? Colleen, we're on page 16. Thanks for joining us. So he talks about the Bible told us long before modern research existed. Proverbs 18:21 warns us that death and life are in the power of the tongue, right? That little muscle has so much power. Our words are incredibly powerful, even if they're spoken to ourselves. They're very, very powerful. They can build up or tear down, and words can inspire faith, encourage, or prescribe fear and doubt. And like Trina said, we get to choose which one. There's a choice that we are given. So he didn't stay, the Pillsbury Doughboy, but guess what stayed? The words. Isn't it funny? Like, your circumstances can completely change, but the words are still there. We're still holding on to that old belief. I don't know if you guys have read some of Dr. Kevin Leman's books. I have several of them. And I believe we had gone through some of the parenting books years ago. And so when he started talking about him, I immediately knew some of his books that he has. And I loved this is to what Trina was saying as well. Parents actually have the power to counterbalance the negativity their children encounter in culture. Like, that's a really, like, your kids are going to come home and they're going to have a certain point of view about something. And instead of just, affirming that or letting them sit in that, we can say, but what if? What if not? Or what's the other side to that story? There's always two sides, right? I'm just going to read your guys' comments. If you have something to share, please share it.
Just a quick little thing. I never correct anybody when they pronounce my name wrong, but it would be Kevin Leman.
Oh, see? Thank you. That's a really positive reinforcement. Leman. Holly, I believe you've told me that before.
I tell people all the time. It's just, but it just reads weird. Like, unless you're like a foreigner who's learning how to read, it's like nobody gets it right. I was at my wedding and they pronounced it wrong. So,
oh my goodness. Keep telling people that. Allie's talking about taking this in to help with parenting. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. We often doubt ourselves so much as parents, right? Like, am I messing up my kid? Am I like totally creating awful people here? You're not. You're not. Being aware, calling it out, practicing in your kids is so powerful, so very. And then Suzanne, your comment to stop dreaming so big. It'll never happen, right? You're affirming that it won't if we keep saying that. Okay, moving on to the identity part. I think this is just as much adults. He's talking about kids having an identity crisis, and I think this is just as much older adults as well, to the same perceptions of social media, peer pressure, and societal expectations. And then I took it a little bit further in my brain, and I thought, I think it's even probably a little bit worse in adults than kids sometimes, because kids, we can actually limit their exposure. Adults have to choose how much exposure they're going to allow into their brains, right? And so he talks about social media platforms showcasing seemingly perfectly lives, and then, flawless appearances, ideal bodies. It's such a huge farce. And it takes away the perception of what humanity is supposed to be. We're actually supposed to be different, every one of us. Like, whoever even dreamed up the thing that we should all fit into one mold and have someone set that standard, right? The constant exposure to images of seemingly perfect individuals can lead young people and old, I'm going to add that, older, to develop unrealistic expectations about their own appearances and life achievements. And this facade can cause children and teens to feel inadequate and question their worth, leading to an identity crisis, lowered self-esteem, and even body dysmorphia. This is super common in women. Let's just be very real about it. Like, and even in Plexus, in our business, because so many times I have been approached where there have been different body sizes and shapes, and then people are going to use that image to try and prove that Plexus doesn't work. I mean, like, how absurd is that? Right? Like, it's just so unrealistic and so not achievable that I think those are the people that are convincing themselves that they don't want to change, right? They want to stay where they are. So he talks about, as parents, we must be the primary voice of truth in our children's lives. And again, I'm going to take this into our community here. Our words have the power to shape our identity and destiny. And when we speak that over other people and we see the good in others and we share that, that's very powerful. That's a really good point, Colleen. The lasting impact of negative words. When negative words are spoken to us at a young age, they open the door for doubt. So that's where it starts, right? Although all through our life, those comments and criticisms haunt us, causing us to question ourselves and our ability. And this is the point that I was thinking about last night, and I make fun of it because to me now it's funny, but I was a very chatterbox child. And so I got to school, and the sister before me is only 13 months older than me, was the shyest person alive. Didn't speak unless she whispered it into my mom's ear, and my mom allowed it. And so she shushed me and allowed the other child to stay quiet, which I later on learned as a parent that the shy child, you have to encourage to talk just as much, right? Because they need to gain that confidence. And so I was shh my whole life. And then as I got older, I remember sitting in grade 8, and we, with my peers from school, often make fun of this because the teacher's name was Mr. Dooley. He's an excellent teacher. He was a math and science teacher. And he walked around with a meter stick in his hand, talking, and he had a quiet, monotone voice. He didn't raise his voice. He expected you to listen. So he didn't project his voice or, make it be heard, because intentionally he wanted us to be like leaning in to listen. And so if you were like off on the side, you missed what he was saying. And guess what he did with that meter stick? It would come across your desk if you were talking, and you would lift out of your seat because he had such a powerful way of announcing that he was there. And he caught you talking all the time. And then he always said, Miss Marge, you will not be paid to talk. And I'm like, Mr. Dooley, I'm being paid to talk now. And it's always of how you take it, right? Like it never bothered me because he cracked jokes and he was kind and he was nice, but we still make fun of that because sometimes things turn around differently, and it's how you use them. It's how you use them to be for the betterment of yourself, right? But the lasting impact of negative words, I know that probably all of us would have stories of teachers saying something over us and it just completely demeaned you and made you feel insecure and worthless and like you didn't have self-value. And that feeling of what that emotion brings sticks with you. And those stories are horrible. They're horrible. See, that's a really big point, Colleen. Somewhere along the way, we believe a lie and then we stop being who we authentically are. And then this part of parenting. I have a friend who is constantly compared to his high-achieving older brother. Despite his own talents and accomplishments, my friend grew up feeling inadequate and incapable of meeting his parents' expectations. He always felt that he was in his brother's shadows, and words such as, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" echoed in his mind long into adulthood. And the things that he missed out on, right? Like, I remember when my kids were little, and you learn the different learning abilities and the different strengths of what your kids have. And for one child, academically was super easy. For the other child, academically was hard. But the child who had a hard time with academics showed up and worked harder than the child that had an easy time with academics. So what do you reward, right? And so we started working into the effort that was brought forth, and the effort was rewarded, because how are you going to, this is what you create when you don't, right? If there's anything that comes to mind, please share it. Words can inspire faith and courage or prescribe fear and doubt. And this is where we have that choice that Trina talked about. We get to have a choice. And without realizing it, we replay the worst parts of our lives over and over again. And this is where people get stuck in their trauma, right? Because we recycle the stories in our minds, particularly the hurtful words someone said or the mistakes that we made. And then he talks about Paul in the Bible. I mean, like, think about the mistakes that Paul made, the things that he did. "One thing I do," he says, "forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. I press on towards the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus." Paul's words provide a roadmap for overcoming the self-doubt that many of us deal with. So I thought, if Paul could, then we can too, right?
We
First,
kind of,
go ahead.
sorry, we kind of talked about this in Bible study a few weeks ago. How when someone says something hurtful to us, and then we deal with it and we move forward, but then it's like Satan is like, hey, remember what this person said? Remember that? Remember how that made you feel? And then it's like you're right back where you started. And so I just thought of that when in this rewind, play part, how often we just go back to what we felt and how like we just remember it. But then now for me personally too, like I'm still working on moving past something that someone said about me that wasn't true. And so this book has been really good, very convicting too.
And that we hold the power that we can do it, right? Sometimes we get so caught up in the repetitiveness of it. That's where he talks about acknowledging the past. The first step to dealing with self-doubt is acknowledging the impact. That had a really big impact on you. We can never move past our past until we face it head on. Taking time to recognize what led to our self-doubt, what happened in our past that causes us to fear stepping into our future, is the starting point. And what events from your childhood have you been carrying with you? What words were spoken over you that you believed and received as a truth? Paul's admission in Philippians 3:13 that he has not yet taken a hold of it reflects a humility about his own ongoing journey. We too must recognize the journey that we're on and the factors that contributed to our battle with self-doubt. And then he admonishes us to forget what is behind. And this doesn't mean we erase memories or ignore the past experiences, but rather we refuse to let them define our future. And there's the power that we get to take there, right? It involves a deliberate decision to release past mistakes or negative words from holding us back. And often we drag our past mistakes around with us, reliving them over and over. We allow our failures to become fertile ground for seeds of self-doubt. And this is something John Maxwell now has a new book out, From Failures to, I forgot what the title was, but it's allowing your failures to be your success. Because without failure, we won't succeed. But if we allow our failures to be who we become, we're never going to leave that place, right? We drag around past mistakes. And so I was talking with a friend the other day who also said, I don't know what parts of my story I should be sharing because there's so many past mistakes there that she didn't want to bring up. And I said, what if the lesson is in those mistakes that you can help other people through? Because you've already lived it and you already have the experience. So often the story that we come from, all we see is our failures, but not the lessons that we took from it and that we grew from. And those lessons can be like stepping stones for other people. And by that, we have to allow ourselves to not be defined by failure. Because if you take it as a lesson, then you can move on, right?
And those lessons will return until they're learned.
Mm-hmm.
Lately, yeah, we've been, obviously parenting is huge with that too, but even with ourselves, you know, it's just like, well, I learned that, figured that out. And a lot of times I'm saying to the kids, okay, so what was the lesson? What did you learn? And they're just like, and they'll tell me, and then usually their actions tell me if they actually did or not. But but yeah, it keeps coming back until you do, until you learn it. So the quicker you learn, the better off you are.
100%. That's such a good point. We have to reframe negative past experiences, right? Viewing them as opportunities for growth rather than defining failures. I thought that was a very good statement. So I made a mistake. This is what I learned. Things did not go well. Now the lesson is here, and that's an opportunity for me to grow. So many of us see failure as a final. And it's not, right? Like a loss, a defeat. When you reframe failure, you look for the lesson. Sure, you may have failed, but what can you learn from the experience? Just like Trina said. How can you take something from the failure that will inform your future and help you win next time? That's the question that we get to take there. Straining towards what is ahead. Paul's focus on the straining toward what is ahead highlights the importance of having a forward perspective. Too many times people look to the past for evidence of what is not going to work, but not to the future of what they have already learned, right? This involves setting new goals and embracing the possibilities of what the future can be. And so, Susie, to your point there about dreaming big, setting goals and embracing the possibilities of what the future can be is a really big deal to our brain, because it feeds what you're working towards instead of trying to prove what the past is keeping you back from, right? And as a sports family, yes, you're either winning or you're learning, 100%. I feel like that applies in our business so much. You're winning or you're learning. It's always a new skill set. It's always a new personal growth lesson. It's always something you're either winning or you're learning. It requires that we envision a life not constrained by past doubts, but empowered by the potential of what lies ahead, removing the lid that has kept us confined and reaching for the big life that God has for us. It requires perseverance to press towards the goal. Overcoming self-doubt is not a one-time event, but the continuous process of growth and renewal. It requires persistence and is fueled by the conviction that God has more in store for us.
I think sometimes too, when we just accept failure as part of the process, it's easier to know that we're not going to avoid it. So no matter what we try to do, it's part of it.
Mhm.
It's built in. There's no side door. There's no, right? There's no escape out of it.
Mhm.
It's just built in, and it's what you can't have success without it, right? Like, so once it's just so important to understand that, because then you're like, okay, then you're a little bit more cozy with failure. Maybe not cozy, but at least more accepting of it, to be like, okay, well, this is part of the process, right? And if you think of your kids, would you want, like, how you're feeling? If you're feeling fearful and things like that, I always think, well, would I want them to
Yeah.
feel the way I feel when they're attempting a new task or trying something new, or you know what I mean? Because it's not always going to go perfect the first time, right? So just, I find as a parent, sometimes we parent ourselves at the same time as we're
Oh,
parenting the
so
kids,
much.
because we realize it's a double lesson, because we want them to be open-minded and to try and learn and do things, right? Because the lesson is, there's so much more lesson out of failure than there ever is if you just never make a mistake, right? But we only learn from the mistakes. So
That's such a huge piece. And we're all scared of failure. We actually all are. We're all scared of making mistakes because it's not the best feeling. And yet, if you look back, and this is something where I'm continuously always reminding myself that one time I didn't know how to follow a recipe. One time I didn't know how to make a pot of soup. One time I did, all those things, the simple menial things that you do day by day are skills that you have learned and probably made mistakes by, but perfected because you made it often enough. And so you learned the lesson of that mistake. And it's the same theory of, learning to recognize children's needs. Because the first child or the second child or the third child, they're all going to be different. You're all going to make unique individual mistakes with each one. And this applies to friendships. It applies to life in general, everywhere, right? Yes, John Maxwell's making failure and fear of failure feel like normal. And so if you think about being scared of the fear of failure, is it the fear that is holding you back or the actual failure? Because the lesson lies in the failure. And so if we continuously hold ourselves back from trying anything, and for us in this business, it would be sending the messages, getting the no's, getting the objections, getting the people that are adamant that, we're doing something not good, or whatever it is that you're facing that makes you feel like a failure, is what is actually going to grow you. And so if we do more of that, we're doing what John Maxwell says and making it feel like normal. Oh, we recognize the feeling, and then we start saying, oh, this is normal. Okay, how did I deal with this last time? Maybe I can learn something more again. And you keep one step at a time, keep moving forward, right? Words spoken over us and experiences we had in the early years form the way we approach life and see ourselves. Is so crucial to how we have been taught failure as a kid as well, right? Like I remember my son, who has a very visionary mind and still does, can do anything with his hands. When he started Lego, and he would be like, I'm going to make this. and then he'd start putting pieces together and it didn't work the way that he wanted it to work. And he would, all of a sudden his anger would just be like, and then he'd throw it away. He'd be so upset because it didn't turn out the way that he had visualized. And so now the effort wasn't working, right? And so if you didn't learn by that and bring the child back to say, hey, this actually works, let me help you. That's the exact same thing that adults do. The exact same thing. It's just in a different form.
On the weekend, Ethan learned how to rock pick for the first time. And he was actually, when Rodney said, I need you to rock pick. And he's like, no. And I was like, oh, Ethan, I said, we're learning how to do this, remember? And he said, yeah. So anyway, he went out for a couple hours and learned, came back just to go. And like, I am awful at this, Mom. I am so awful. And I said, you know what? You got to suck at something long enough to be good enough. Good at it, sorry. And so he's like, okay, well, tomorrow I'll be able to get a, better knack for it. So anyways, then he spent 2 9-hour days doing it over the weekend. And he's an old pro now.
See?
So it's one of those things where you're right. It's you have to get past and move through all the things. Yeah, before and it's easier for me to give examples of other people because I struggle with this myself, right? It's a big struggle of mine, but it's so important for us to realize it's part of the deal. Rather than realizing we're doing something wrong because we're failing. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes we think, well, we must be doing something wrong. There must be something, a little trick or a tip or no, there's nothing. There's nothing. It's just this is the process, right?
Such a good example. And that we can, that you used it for him, that he in such a short time became confident, because when you have permission to suck at it first, it almost gives you it takes the weight off your shoulders. It doesn't make it as hard, right? Because you have someone's support behind you. I think the most common question I get in this business is, what am I doing wrong? Because we feel like we're doing something wrong. That's why it's not working, right? You're not doing anything wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just allowed to suck at something.
I think it was a podcast where John Maxwell was on, and he said the most successful people are the ones that have failed the most.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just very encouraging.
It gives you the permission, and it doesn't have to be hard or heavy, and you don't blame yourself, right? Gives me a lot of freedom to think that way. I've heard it said you can't go back and make a new start, but you can start right now and make a brand new ending. Love that. There's always newness for us. The chapters in your past are already written. They can't be changed. They may include rejection, loss, failure, and pain, but those chapters don't determine how your story ends. Your story is one of courage and strength. Your story is filled with hope and a future because your story is still being written. And when you take the pen out of the hand of self-doubt and fear and put it in the hand of God, He will begin to write a new narrative filled with confidence and purpose. I think that's a wonderful place to end our first chapter there. I would encourage you to do the questions, work out the doubt, write those things down. Because when we bring things to light, sometimes in here, it can seem like a really big deal because we keep replaying it. And all of a sudden, when you start writing it down, or if you are sharing it verbally with someone, it doesn't sound half as bad as what we've made it to be or think that it actually was. And then when you bring it to light, it kind of diminishes. And then you're able to see the good of learning that lesson and moving forward. Anything else that stands out to you from this chapter or from what we've gone through so far? If not, thank you for being here. We will reconvene next week, Wednesday, same time, same place. And I believe we should probably do chapter 2 and 3. Today we did the acknowledgement and chapter 1. So let's go for 2 and 3 next week. Have a great day, guys. Talk to you later.